evolution of the industry has changed to where record keeping is tremendously more important.
Made a new rule and everybody had to start keeping records.
Everything's documented.
All right, thanks, Joe. I want to say a couple things before we get going, and this is going to be really high level, very fast, but Lean is not about being prescriptive. I'm not going to tell you exactly how you should do things. It's more about a dialogue and about learning. And so what I want to do is give you basically an idea, maybe a framework you might consider as you're looking at how you might approach improvement in a vertical integration. And so with that, I'm hoping to get some interaction. I'm going to hit one point where I'm going to ask you what are some of the challenges you might see in this vertical integration. I want to use those as examples as we go on. So I would appreciate your feedback. So I'm Jeromy. I'm a Lean coach at P&L. We're a research laboratory, and agriculture is not my background. So this is fun. I've actually learned a lot this morning. It's been really interesting. I have some friends who are growers, and so I can understand a little bit of the challenges that they face. So as far as background, I'm going to talk about, just kind of give you an example of a vertical integration, and then I'm going to go into some ways to look at maybe developing staff and looking at process improvement. So first, imagine I am a pie maker, and I sell these pies at my local farmer's market. I might have some requirements. I want to make them out of Golden Delicious. I want no pests in them, right? Just the basics. I would like them to be ripe when I use them, unblemished, clean, firm, and maybe a consistent size. So if we're looking at the vertically integrated apple pie, what does that mean to you? Well, we might want to ask ourselves the question, how do we think from our customers' requirements back to our assets, instead of the other way around? Instead of what do I have and how can I make you buy it, first think, what do you want and how can I provide that to you? So first of all, somebody has to have some trees somewhere. They need to take care of them so that they don't grow worms, right, or other pests. They have to know when to harvest them so that they will be ripe when they get to me. They have to harvest them, have the right equipment to harvest them so that they don't get bruised and blemished along the way. Have to have the right equipment to effectively move them from one place to another so they don't cost too much and so they don't get damaged. Have to be able to move them from the trees to a facility where they will then sort them and wash them. Move them from there to a place where I can easily and conveniently go and buy them, and then store them in a way that is attractive to me as I buy them so I can pick out my apples so that I can then make my apple pies so that then I can sell. So at each of these points, you have an integration point where there are requirements on one end and an output from the other. There's an output and an input, and we need to make sure those two things match. So in this vertical integration, what are some of the challenges you might see that I would face or that you face? Yeah.
Consistency of communication through the assembly chain.
Good. So consistency of the communication through the assembly chain. Okay. What else?
Wow, that came in loud. Some of the questions I would have would be your employees or the people working with you, the ability to handle the technology and work with you for getting this data to you and to get the information to you.
Okay, great. What about the basics of like leaves? Is it okay to have a branch attached to an apple as it leaves and goes through the process, right? There are simple requirements like that, right? And so taking things like that, how do we build those type of requirements back into our process so that that becomes the standard way of us doing work, so it doesn't become a surprise at the end of our process? So basically what we're talking about is how do we make what the next person down the line wants, right? How do these things fit together like this? This is the ideal. They want a blue box. I'm providing a blue box with the right kind of an arrow. But oftentimes what actually happens is something more like this. We provide something that is pretty close, but what we have to do is do some rework. So we send that apple through the entire process of picking it, putting it in my little bin, putting it in the big bin. It gets to the end of the process, and then we have to go and take take the stick off of the apple, right? So we have to do some rework. So how do we, the basic question of this presentation is, how do we build the standard work all the way back at the person who's pulling the apple off of the tree so that the leaves don't end up at the end of the process? And what we have to first do, I would suggest, is maybe have a good understanding of what okay versus not okay is. This is a Toyota thing. So that when we are picking fruit from the tree, the person who's picking the fruit knows no leaves, no leaves, no leaves, no sticks as they pull the apple off of the tree. So then they can start to understand what's the best way to pull an apple off the tree so that then I don't end up with leaves or a stick on it. What this does is it helps us to understand where we are today. So if now I understand that the requirement is you will have no sticks or leaves on the apple at the end of the process, I can now look and go, oh, 5% of the apples that I pick end up with leaves on them. Huh, okay. From there, we start thinking about the goal. The goal is to have no leaves attached, but we can't get from where we are today, that 5% have leaves, to there are no leaves in one leap. We need to do something first. First, we need to standardize our process that we are using by which to pull the apples off the tree. We need to first understand what's causing the 5% to have leaves on them, or what work are we doing for the 95% that causes there to be no leaves, that we're actually picking them correctly the first time. So we standardize our work. When I'm talking about standardized work, somebody was talking about the requirement binders that sit in the office, right? They're not out in the field. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about this thing here, the filing cabinet, right? You know, it's kind of like scrapbooking for the business. You got these big binders, and some people have made great careers out of these type of things. They get looked at once a year. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something more like this. Something that you would use to do the work. Something that explains how we currently do the work. And we approach it in Lean as the current best known way to do the work. And that's very important. It's not the only way to do the work. It is the current best way to do the work. We standardize on it. So once we have created our standard work, and we are actually having repeatable results, we have a consistent work product, then we look to improve. We start to ask ourselves, what are the obstacles? What are the opportunities for improvement? Okay, so now we start focusing in on that 5% that still has the leaves and the branch attached. What can we do about that? And somebody actually mentioned something very similar to this earlier, is a shift from managed by objective to managed by means. Anybody heard this conversation before? Okay, one in the back. So the difference between the two, managed by objective, I say we're going to pick X number of tons of fruit per acre of this type of fruit. We're focusing on the outcome. The other one is, how did we do that? We focus on the means by which we do that. Well, we have X number of workers who pick with their left hand at the top of a ladder, and they put it into a bin, and then we move them to the large bin, and we get them out of the field. So we focus more on the how we're doing the work. And with this, we start to focus on experimentation. So, and we start to focus on helping staff to develop. So we would take a line worker, the person who's pulling the apple off the tree, and start to ask them, okay, what are the things that lead to the 5% of apples having leaves on them? We list those things out, and we say, okay, which one would you like to try and tackle first? So if they say, you know what, I notice when I pull with my left hand, I end up with more leaves than on the right, I think. Okay, so what's an experiment we could do to see if that is the case? We do the experiment, we see what we learn. And as we come up with an improvement, we say, okay, we're going to take these 5 workers who are working on this part of our orchard, and we're going to actually use this new standard work. They're going to pull with their left hand, and we're going to see if that leads to an improvement. And we start doing experimentation to improve our standard work. And what this does is it actually helps your staff to start thinking about not just moving apples from here to here, but what is the best way for us to do that? How could we improve? And start thinking about improvement opportunities in the field. And once you get them engaged, hopefully, instead of just having their hands, you'll actually have their minds and their hearts in the work as well. So they're thinking about the work that they do. It's valuable work, and they're looking to improve it every day. Thank you.